And so I had an ultrasound on it and looked for all intents and purposes fine. They did a biopsy on it, came back inconclusive, so nothing really to worry about, but it was quite big. There was a lump in my neck, it was quite big, but they can see. If the first one's come back inconclusive, then the chances are the second one will come back inconclusive as well. Just get out of bed and put your feet on the floor. Just brush your teeth. Just have a shower. Just get dressed and just focus on those 5-10 minute increments. Because if you were thinking weeks or months in advance, that's terrifying. You can't, your brain, my brain can compute that. And was my mental health good? No, you're just kind of in a daze, not really knowing what's going on, just floating from appointment to appointment, especially with kids that age. Yeah. Everybody just moves on, don't they? Eventually, as they should. But knowing that you weren't going to be there for, I see sports days and first days at school when they start school or when they graduate from nursery or when they learn to ride their bike they're all special moments anyway.
This is Rock Bottom with Ryan. No sugarcoating, no filters. The pain, the chaos, the truth. No bullshit. Just recovery.
If you're struggling with alcohol, trauma, or simply questioning your relationship with alcohol, you don't have to figure it all out alone. Megan Haynes Counseling offers a supportive, judgment-free space to help you understand what's underneath the drinking, work through trauma, and start building a life that actually feels good to live. Megan brings both professional experience and a real understanding of recovery, and she knows that healing isn't just a one-size-fits-all. Whether you're sober curious, trying to make a change, or looking for support on your recovery journey, reaching out could be the first step towards something better. To learn more or schedule a consultation with Megan Haynes Counseling, call 541-213-9321. That's 541-213-9321. Thank you so much for listening. Please give Megan a call. Find her on Instagram at Megan J. Haynes. Enjoy this episode. All right, welcome to another episode of Rock Bottom with Ryan. I'm here with my guest today, Lee Crompton. Lee, how you doing?
I'm very well, Ryan. How are you?
Doing well. Literally excited to have you on today. And we're discussing a topic we don't discuss a ton on this show. We talk a lot about recovery from addiction and alcohol and trauma and stuff like that. But today we're going to be talking about recovery from a cancer diagnosis that you had and how it took you to your own version of rock bottom as well. And I think that's something we should definitely put out there more for listeners to hear, that there are so many different versions and types of rock bottoms and different things that can take us down and that we have to overcome. And we're excited to hear your story today. So tell us a little bit of basics about yourself, like where you're from, all that, and kind of, I know you were diagnosed back in 2020. So just kind of tell us about life growing up before that.
Yeah. So I was born in the West Midlands in England and went traveling in 2020. No, I didn't. I'll do that again. Sorry. I went traveling in 2004 and met my now wife, who is Scottish. So I lived the last 20 years in Scotland. Yeah, I work in construction. I host my own podcast, which I think we'll come on to, which is a combination of what's happened in the last few years. Yeah, life took a turn, as I think probably the best place to start is the beginning of 2020. In January, my second daughter was born. And then you might have heard of this, but in March, everything kind of went into lockdown. Don't know whether the same was for you over there. I think it was pretty worldwide. Yeah, so we had this global pandemic on our hands and everyone went into lockdown, and I was, did you have furlough over there? We had a thing called furlough.
No, did not.
Okay, so furlough was a thing that the British government brought in, which was basically putting people on a minimum wage so that people weren't laid off from work. They put people on furlough. So as it transpired with me, I was at home with a 3-year-old, working from home, a newborn baby, wife was on maternity leave, and everyone else in my team had been furloughed. So I was the only person who was manning all the calls for whether it was health and safety, planning, project management, and my own job, which is surveying. So it was quite a stressful time, and I'd always had what I thought were raised glands in my neck. And I always blame the kids because they're coming home with coughs and colds and what have you. But obviously we weren't going anywhere. We weren't seeing anyone. I'm working from home. So I'm like, why does my neck still feel puffy? So that was the start of it all, really. The start of where everything kind of flipped on a dime, as you might say over there.
Yeah. Jeez, that's crazy. So tell me, like, so that was your first, like, symptoms that first started? Was your glands?
Yeah, and so I had an ultrasound on it, and looked, for all intents and purposes, fine. They did a biopsy on it, came back inconclusive, so nothing really to worry about, but it was quite big. There was a lump in my neck, it was quite big, but they gave me 3 options. They said, well, you can have another biopsy. If the first one's come back inconclusive, then the chances are the second one will come back inconclusive as well. We could just keep an eye on it because we've had an ultrasound of it and it looks kind of okay. Just keep an eye on it. Or you could go just straight to surgery, have it removed. And for someone who I would say second guess is, will not make a decision in terms of, well, I'll just ring my wife and just make sure that she does want that flavor of pizza before I make a decision. For some reason, I said, well, should we just go straight to surgery? And they said, well, that's, it's a bit extreme. Are you sure? Excuse me. And so I said, yeah, I think, there's a chance it's only going to get bigger. Let's just take it out. And they said, well, we can get you in quite quickly because I know what it was like over there, but nobody wanted to go to hospital during COVID in the UK. Everyone was shit scared of going to hospital.
The last place people want to be.
We can get you in quite quick. And I was like, okay, good. Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, Ryan. I was, other than having my throat slit, because it was thyroid cancer. Sorry, it wasn't thyroid cancer at that point. It was a lump in my neck. So other than having my throat slit, having then 2 young children, I hadn't had a full night's sleep in probably 4 years. So to go into hospital, no visitors, you're not allowed any visitors because it was COVID. So you went in, hospital, full night's sleep, watch whatever you want on the television. You have to watch Cocomelon, you watch whatever you like on the television. They bring you jelly and ice cream to your bed. It was like the COVID equivalent of like a spa break, really, other than having my throat slit. So that was that. And they removed the lump, and the surgeon had it in his hand and said, yeah, it's a big bugger. He says, but a couple of dense bits we need to look under the microscope, but nothing really to worry about. Okay, fine. And that was it. I went home, and 3 weeks later, I went in for the results, and my wife said, well, do you want me to come in with you? And I said, well, there's no point. You can't come in with me anyway. When we get this 45-minute drive to the hospital, we've got 2 young kids. You're not allowed in anyway. If it had been anything serious, they'd have been quicker than 3 weeks. So I went into the lion's den, and that's when, everything changed. And I found that it was anaplastic thyroid cancer, which they didn't give me timescales at the time. They gave me a leaflet or a booklet, which they said, you might as well have this. It's got the 3 main types of thyroid cancer. Yours is so rare. There's nothing in there about yours, but you might as well have it for what it's worth. So I said, well, would you mind writing what I have got on the front cover, which I've actually still kept? Can you write down what I have got? So they wrote down anaplastic thyroid cancer. And they said, whatever you do not Google anaplastic thyroid cancer because there's no good news about it.
Jeez.
So it's like, okay, fine. So, and I knew, I think the appointment was 9 o'clock. So I thought, I'll be in 9 o'clock. I'll go in. They'll say, yeah, everything's fine. I'll be out again by 9:10 and ring the wife from the car park. However, is now getting to 9:45, fast tracked for a CT scan, and I haven't got reception in the hotel because it's really bad for reception. So I thought she's going to know. It's now 9:45 and she hasn't heard from me. She's going to know that something's up.
Yeah.
And they said, yeah, Glasgow. I just remember the surgeon was saying, just shaking his head. He goes, "You've got young children, haven't you?" And I was like, yeah. And he's like, "I'm so sorry. I'm really sorry. Glasgow will be in touch," which is like the nearest big hospital. Glasgow will be in touch and take it from there. But yeah, that was from going from the night before to stressing about, shit, I didn't send that work email.
Yeah. To
The wallpaper.
life-changing news.
Yeah. Because I was stressing like before about the fact that we were trying to do up the hallway. And I don't think the wallpaper hadn't turned up. And I hadn't been for a run, which I planned to do. And there was a work email that I hadn't sent. And you realize in that moment that none of that matters a fuck.
That was my next question, was like, what went through your mind exactly when you were told, kind of like being told you got 6 months to live? I mean, that's got to be intense to hear.
Yeah. Well, they said Glasgow would be in touch. So I left there kind of in a daze. They hadn't given me timescales at that point, but I could tell from the body language it wasn't good. And of course I Googled anaplastic thyroid cancer and found out that, yeah, it's got an average life expectancy of 4 months. 90% of people are dead within 12 months. And there's nobody kind of 2 or 3 years if you're lucky, but you're talking like 5% of people. So yeah, I went into Glasgow. I got the phone call. We went into Glasgow, obviously still wearing our masks and whatever, because it's still, it's COVID. And saw my surgeon, and he said, yeah, you've got to come back in. You've got to come back in Monday and have another operation because we need to take the rest of your thyroid out. So he said, you'll have a COVID test. He said, but it really doesn't matter whether you're positive or not. He said, you're coming in Monday. If you end up positive, then my team will just have to take extra precautions because it needs to come out on Monday. And I remember my wife saying, there's a chance that he's, we can save him. And I remember the surgeon was going, no, this stuff's like wildfire. So it'll go around your bloods and your system and will infect you. Will make you you struggle with your windpipe, you'll struggle with your breathing, you'll struggle with your swallowing. And yeah, it'll just make the end awful. So this second operation now, if the first one was a spa day, I'm now going in for the same operation to have the rest of my thyroid removed, basically not to save me, but to just make the end less grisly.
Yeah.
So you're going in with a completely different mindset. And that's when they said, yeah, 6 months, the words were 6 months would be a positive outcome. Yeah, here we are nearly 6 years later and I'm somehow still knocking about. But yeah, that was when life changed completely for me and my family. And yeah, it certainly puts things into perspective.
I'm sorry. I'm sure that news, that news probably affected you incredibly emotionally the first few days, and I'm sure your wife was scared as well. And did you ever have like a moment where you truly thought this is it, and you started this might be a morbid question, but started kind of just planning for the worst, or did you just have hope from day one?
No, I mean, I didn't have any hope really, because I mean, everything that I was being told, everything that you Googled, everything that you looked at with anaplastic thyroid cancer, that's
Nothing
the end.
positive. Yeah.
There's no cure. There's nothing positive about it at all. So no, I mean, and I think that's what I found quite hard, was because you start to think, well, of that 6 months that I've allegedly got at best, is that 4 months sort of compos mentis and 2 months in a care home or, in palliative care? So no, I mean, we were trying to sort out, because of course everyone's going, you should go to Disneyland. Go to Disneyland with your kids. And even if I wanted to go to Disneyland for the holiday of a lifetime, I can't go anywhere. We're in lockdown. And I'm too busy. I saw, and I think this is the thing that I get pissed off with, like well-being of people. As someone who's been given 6 months to live, what matters in life, and they'll tell you they have zero fucks and they're just doing what they want, and not. No, they're not. People who've been told they get 6 months to live are planning their funeral, sorting out powers of attorney. They're wondering who's going to get the Christmas decorations down next year when you've put them up in the loft for what you thought was the last time. They're, trying to think of Christmas presents and birthday presents for their kids for the next 18 years, whatever. Do you know what I mean? It's just an
Scary
admin.
thought.
It's an admin nightmare, Ryan. But no, it's
Sorry.
it's not all. It does put things in perspective, but I've got a to-do list. The boiler, for example. Right, I don't want to leave my wife and kids in a house where the boiler keeps breaking down, so I need to get that sorted.
Yeah.
It's all just very boring.
No, it's just thinking of all those things that maybe seemed pretty easy and not as significant, throughout all the years. And now you're taking all those things seriously. Like, I got to make sure that my kids have good birthdays after I'm gone, or I have to make sure that everybody's taken care of, my power of attorney, or I got to make sure the sink is running perfectly. It's like the scary things to think about. They seem so minuscule, but they're huge in the big picture. So
right down where the stopcock is. Right, get a replacement light bulb for every light bulb in the house. If one goes, you've already got. It's just like stuff like that in between going for bloods and going for scans and going for appointments and what have you. It's just the practical stuff of like, how do I? And I think in a way that kind of keeps you going, because if you stop and think about what's actually happening, that's like you can't get your head around that.
Yeah. That's so
true. Like you saying about those first few days when I wasn't really thinking anything, because I just remember I was walking around like shaking my head going, this can't be happening. You're just in it. You know what I mean? When someone tells you you've got 6 months to live. Yeah. My initial reaction wasn't really, obviously it's fuck.
Now that was my next question, is like, when you hear that kind of news, like we talk a lot about mental health on the show, but how did you notice changes in that after hearing the prognosis? And over time, did it get better? Did it get worse? Did you have like a battle with acceptance, or what was it like?
No, I think there's two sides to that. So I think first of all, there's your mental health of being told you've got 6 months to live, which initially, I think you're just in a daze. Do you know what I mean? You're not, I didn't take it in at the time. It takes maybe a couple of days for it to start to sink in and go, oh fuck, this isn't a bad dream. This is actually happening. So there's that side of things, I think, with mental health, and my wife was very good at like, try not to think too far ahead, because that's just depressing. Just get out of bed and put your feet on the floor. Just brush your teeth. Just have a shower. Just get dressed, and just focus on those 5-10 minute increments. Because if you were thinking weeks or months in advance, that's terrifying. You can't, my brain can compute that. And was my mental health good? No, you're just kind of in a daze, not really knowing what's going on, just floating from appointment to appointment and trying to get things sorted in your head and what have you. But then I think the flip side of that is that now 5.5 years or 6 years on, is I would say that I've always struggled with my mental health, but being diagnosed with cancer has almost given me permission to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because people go, well, of course you've got mental health problems. You were told you had 6 months to live. Because the flip side of that is, great. Everyone wants a good luck story. Everyone wants a happy ending. And you get a slap on the back and go, yeah, great, you survived. You beat the odds. Well, yeah, I did. But then that comes with its own. When you've been told you've got 6 months to live and you've almost made all those preparations.
Yeah.
To then be told, you've looked inside Pandora's box and you've been faced with your immortality. And then someone says, oh, just don't worry about that. Just shut the lid, pretend you've not seen any of that, and just go back to work on Monday morning and just pretend none of it happened. And that's as much. No, that's a lot. It's not as difficult, but it's still a difficult place to be, because, people, quite rightly, I found that people don't want to talk to you when you're diagnosed with cancer, because what do you say to the guy who's been told he's got 6 months to live?
Yeah.
Equally, then everyone wants to talk to you when it seems like you've dodged a bullet. Everyone comes out the woodwork then and wants to congratulate and whatever. And they're like, well, it's not. is a congratulations, but at the same time, it's like, this is fucking weird because the meteor didn't hit,
Yeah.
and we've all got to carry on as if nothing
Yeah,
happened.
nothing happened.
And you can't change. Your whole view on life is now completely skewed.
Yeah.
Nothing quite feels as safe as it used to. So no, I mean, there's, like I said, there's the two aspects of the mental side of actually the diagnosis, and then almost the mental side of not dying, I guess.
Yeah. And what you said about you have struggled with depression, maybe anxiety, hopelessness before, but you didn't feel comfortable talking about it as much until this happened.
Yeah, I
Right.
mean, I think I'm someone who's always struggled with depression, anxiety at various points in my life. Kind of had various talking therapies, but nothing really worked. And yeah, on and off. And I never really spoke about it because I think I don't know whether it's a male thing, but we don't tend to talk about our feelings too much, and you don't want to cause a fuss. I mean, can I tell you a story about not making a fuss? This, I think, just about sums up probably why I didn't sort of talk about I think there's an element of shame, but there's an element of not wanting to make a fuss. And my perfect story for me not making a fuss is that when I was in hospital having that second operation, it felt awful because obviously my mind's in a completely different space. I'm not eating jelly and ice cream at the bed now. I'm going in to make my death less horrible. And they've gone in through the same scar to take the rest of my thyroid out. And it doesn't feel, it's in a different hospital, and it doesn't feel the same as it did the first time at all. It feels much more, I think they've had a right good route around. They've basically taken everything out that isn't keeping me alive. So they've ripped everything out of my throat. And it feels awful. I feel like I've got this, compression on my chest. I'm struggling to breathe. It feels like every time I swallow, it's like I'm swallowing barbed wire. I'm really not in a good place at all. I remember the nurse came round and he said, on a scale of 1 to 10, 0 being no pain at all, 10 being excruciating pain, what would you say your pain level is? And I'm like, well, I'm really struggling to breathe, and it feels like I've got this weight on my chest, and it's probably a 7, because I don't want to make too much of a fuss, right? And I remember he looked me up and down and said, I'll put you down as a 3. And he walked off. Me, being me, took that as, well, he knows better than me what my pain is, even though it's me that's feeling it, because he's a medical professional. So I let that happen. I let him write down 3 and walk off. And of course, I've got the bell there I can ring if I'm in pain or if I'm, I want assist. And of course, did I ring the bell? Of course I didn't ring the bell, because I didn't want to be a nuisance. I didn't want to make a fuss. I don't know whether it's a British thing, I don't know. But no, I lay there thinking, oh God, what an idiot. I'm just making a big fuss. Even though I allegedly at that point have 4 months to live, I'm lying there going, oh, I don't want to make a nuisance of myself. So yeah. Hopefully that tells you, pre-cancer, no, I didn't talk about my mental health. I think it was, still up until very recently, I think it's still been a lot of stigma attached to it. But I think coming onto the podcast, so I had a lot of people, having been through what I've been through, come up to me and use all the words that I don't like. So, you've been so brave and you're so inspirational and you're so strong. And we're like, well, you haven't really got a lot of choice. You just got to crawl through the mud and hope for the best. But people would come up to you and go, well, I'm struggling with my mental health, and you've been through the mill. Have you got any tips? Have you got any advice? And I'm like, not really, no.
No.
But why don't we do this podcast and explore, cold water therapy or yoga or breath work or whatever it might be? We've had spirit guides on, we've had all sorts of folk. And just, what works for you might not work for me, and vice versa. And let's just use this as a vehicle to just kind of explore all these different areas and see what's worked. So I find it very cathartic, and it has given me the opportunity to, talk more, I think, about my mental health, because people go, well, yeah, like I said, he's he was told he was going to die. So of course he's got mental health problems, and he's giving me permission.
Yeah. No, it's so that's kind of why you started opening up more about it, was just meeting other
Hmm.
people that hadn't opened up to. Okay. So I have a couple questions about family. Like you said you have two young daughters, and how did that change the way you approached your diagnosis?
I think we went through IVF to have the kids. So we were initially told we couldn't have kids, and then we were lucky enough to have two. So like I said, at the time of diagnosis, I had a 3-year-old girl and an 8-month-old girl who are now, thankfully, 6 and 9. But obviously at the time I thought I might get to see Littland's first birthday because that was the January. But I probably wasn't going to get to see my eldest's 4th birthday because that was the March. And by then it should have been game over. I think, I tell the story that if they'd have given me an option and said, well, we have to cut off both your arms and legs, but you'll get another 5 years, I'd have gone, okay, sign me up, because I just want to see my kids. Just want to see my kids grow up. And I think that's the thing in that moment, what actually matters. I think you realize that there's nothing really. There's very little. There's very little that matters, other than I want to see my kids grow up. And you realize all the small stuff that you worry about, and what are other people thinking, and have I done this and I haven't done that, and just beating yourself up, and all the chatter in your head doesn't matter. Now
Yeah.
that said, 5 years on, like this morning, if we're desperate to go out somewhere, and I'm saying to the kids, "Come on, just get your shoes on. For God's sake, where have you left your shoes?" "Oh, Dad, I don't know." And you just have to remember, this is all I ever wanted. What I'm saying is very easy to slip back into, in inverted commas, normal life.
Yeah.
But yeah, you've always got that in the back of your head that it is very precious, and it can just change, like you say. And that in the night before that meeting, I was in WhatsApp chats with folk talking about this, that, and the other, which I thought was important at the time. And then you realize that it's not important. And in terms of priorities, and it was very difficult with the kids, because what do you do? What do you do with an 8-month-old and a 3-year-old in lockdown to hashtag make memories when you can't go anywhere? I've actually written a play.
Wow. Stayed busy.
Because I do enjoy write dark comedy. But I've written a play about my diagnosis, and it's basically about a man called Brian, who I invented in my head. My wife was, 40, early 40s when I was diagnosed. 2 young kids. Sorry, but I've gone off at a tangent, but this is in answer to your question
No, I
about
love listening. No, it's fine.
how I dealt with it, with having 2 young kids. So Brian in my head was, my wife was going to eventually meet someone else. She's still young. Brian is probably going to move into my house and wear my slippers, and probably never done a day's work in his life. And he's going to walk in here, and I don't remember anything from when I was 8 months old, 3 years old. So they're probably going to call him, my kids are probably going to call him Dad, and he's not their dad. I'm their dad. And so I'd invented this whole character called Brian, who was going to kind of take my place. And I think that's the thing is, there's all sorts going on in your head about legacy. And I think I did think about that a lot in terms of what do you do to try and, how do you, my major concern was the fact that, with my kids being that age, I was just going to be some old bloke in a photograph. They won't know me. So how do you say leave a legacy? Sounds a bit pompous, but how do you be remembered, especially with kids that age?
Yeah.
Everybody just moves on, don't they? Eventually, as they should. But knowing that you weren't going to be there for, I see sports days and first days at school, when they start school or when they graduate from nursery or when they learn to ride their bike, they're all special moments anyway, but there's just an extra little, I don't know, special moment, and that's
take nothing for granted now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think. Sorry, go on.
Did you ever have to have that? I mean, I know they were really young at the time, but what was the hardest conversation you had to have with your family as a whole? And like, were there moments that you broke down when nobody was around, where you just tried to comprehend everything that was going on?
Yeah. I mean, that happened quite regularly, but not with the kids. I mean, the kids were oblivious. Like I say, they're 8 months old and 3, so they didn't have a clue. They were probably slightly curious as to why my wife was like the fucking paparazzi, just like taking every photo and video that she could of me.
Yeah.
And what I found was that it was quite, I've said this before, that IVF I found quite a galvanizing thing to go through, because you got two people who are aiming towards the same goal. Whereas I found that with the diagnosis, the cancer diagnosis, I found that quite difficult at times, because you've got one person who's got a to-do list, a finite to-do list, and a finite time to do it in. But in some ways, I've got the easy end of the stick, because I'm, in 6 months' time, I'm going to be dead. It's my wife who's then, her priorities, if you like, are how am I going to pay the mortgage? How am I going to raise 2 kids on my own? How do I deal with the aftermath? So she's we're both focused on very separate timelines almost.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's not easy when you can almost hear the clock ticking in your head.
Yeah. Can you take me into, I'm sure that was really tough for her too, just for a different array of reasons, losing the person she loves, not to mention raising kids on her own and trying to do it all, with your absence. And that's tough. Can you take me into, how did cancer change who you were as a husband, a father, a man altogether? Like, how did that work?
I think it's changed me. The aftermath, yeah. I think at the time, did it really? Not really, because I think you're so in the system, and you're so in the turmoil of just trying to get out of bed, just trying to get dressed. Mentally, you're just all over the place, but you're constantly going for appointments. I mean, I was constantly having blood appointments. Obviously, I had the second operation. I'm recovering from that. I'm having bloods done. I'm having scans done. I then went into a lead-lined room for 3 days and got blasted with radioactive iodine treatment. So a Geiger counter above the bed, and I couldn't be with my family then for 10 days afterwards, because I'm still radioactive. So I had to isolate. Not that we were all isolating anyway, but I had to isolate from my own family as well, because I'm still radioactive when I come out. So you're always in the system. There's always the next appointment that's only more than like 2 or 3 days away. I think I'm probably always slightly better in a crisis.
Yeah.
I think it was, as I kind of alluded to earlier, it was more difficult when you weren't doing those things, because you had time to think. And when you had time to think,
So you get in your head.
the tough ones. If I didn't have an appointment for a week and you go, well, the fuck do I do now? I've got a week thinking about
what the next appointment's going to bring. And
thinking, well, not even that, thinking about how long have I got left, and all the kind of, what's the existential stuff.
So you went through a lot of different forms of treatment. Like, what type of treatment did you go through, or did you undergo in order to get through this, like physically? And then what kept you moving forward when things started to look impossible?
Well, so I had the radioactive iodine treatment. And then it was quite early on, to be honest. I think I was diagnosed in September, had the second operation. I think I then went in because I had to recover from that operation in order for me to go in and have the radioactive iodine treatment. But between the two, I'd say we spoke to an oncologist, and I remember him saying, so maybe a month, 6 weeks in, and I remember him saying, he really didn't want to put his cock on the block, but he was saying, I think we might have been a little bit hasty about this 6-month diagnosis. I'm like, okay, so what are we thinking? He's like, he didn't really want to say it. I think you might get 12 months out of this. And I remember coming out of there, like punching the air like fucking Rocky. Yes, 12 months. And it was only like 2 or 3 days later, I'm like, hang on a minute. Why am I
Why are you so excited that you're given this?
Why am I so excited? Because obviously, because it was twice as long as I thought it was going to get. Even so, if you'd have gone, well, you've got a year to live, you go, well, that's still pretty shit. I think just, again, it was family. I mean, I did some ridiculous things. Just me being stupid and pig-headed. For example, I'd been into the So I'd had an operation or 2 operations in quick succession in September. I've had radioactive iodine treatment. I've been told I'm going to die. But there's a very good charity who looked after me and my family particularly well, called Maggie's. Now, Maggie's in January do this 50-mile challenge. So you run 50 miles in January. I'm like, yeah, I could do that. I mean, looking back now, you go, what the fuck were you thinking, right? You just, after what your body's been through and what you thought was going to happen to you. But I don't know, again, whether that's a legacy thing or I don't know. But obviously being in the position I was, raised thousands of pounds for Maggie's, which is great. But yeah, I decided, I remember, obviously it's January in the UK, well, in Scotland. So it's ice and snow. And there's me running 50 miles because I felt that I had something to prove. And again, me doing that was me kind of sticking 2 fingers up at cancer, I guess. And it was just that, I suppose I'm just stubborn, Ryan, really. And I just, if there was any glimmers of hope, then because I suppose after a period of time, as the months wore on, there was that glimmer of hope. Whereas there wasn't initially, because like you say, you were told that's it. You get a special pass with anaplastic thyroid cancer. You go straight to stage 4. There's no cure. The end is nigh. But then as time goes on, you get to 6 months and go, you did say I was going to be dead by now. What are we thinking? Well, we just maybe we'll see how you are after 12 months. And at that stage, I'm seeing them still every month to have bloods done and whatever. But no, I mean, they just kept kicking the can down the road. And so as time goes by, you go, do you know what? I think I'm just going to keep going until they tell me otherwise, because they just, you get to 12 months, they go,
you're still here, right? Might as well
get to
just
18 months. And yeah, well, now, I mean, it's only recently they've gone, do you know what? I think you might actually be all right.
Yeah, it's a good thing to be right about. Yeah.
So yeah. So
amazing.
Yeah, I think just that hope starts to just, I suppose, grow and accumulate, and you go, well, I might. But again, I suppose it's going back to the guy who told me I was a 3.
Yeah.
Pain threshold. You just assume, not to take anything away from the medical people, but you just assume, well, they know more than me. They're the medical professional. They're the doctor. They're the surgeon. If they say I've got 4 months to live, 6 months to live, 12 months to live, then
believe them.
Who am I to? I don't know. I'm just, working a building site. I don't know any difference. You just assume that everybody knows better than you do. And then over a period of time, you start to go, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
I think I might have, at time of recording, dodged a bullet.
Wow. It's incredible.
And nobody knows why. They've double and triple checked the original diagnosis, rather. It was anaplastic thyroid cancer. But do you know what? I think if it hadn't have been COVID, and if I hadn't have been able to have that first operation so quickly, it might have been a different story. I think if it had been another, what they seem to say, if it just caught it, just happened to be lucky enough to catch it at the right time, and if it had been a couple of more months later, in that, going back full circle to that conversation, if I'd have made the decision, well, let's just keep an eye on it, or let's have another biopsy and see what that says, that period of time probably would have been the difference between me sat here talking to you now and not.
Yeah. No, that's
again where your mind goes, what?
Yeah. That's crazy. What parts of your old self died during this whole experience? When you look back, what parts of your old self did you leave behind, and what parts of yourself were born because of all of those?
I think realizing, like you say, what's important in life. And I mean, I've always valued creativity, and I realized that that's what brings me joy. So, writing, whether that's scripts or whether that's books or films or what have you, then that's, I put much more value on that, because if you have, we've all got a finite amount of time, right? Whether you've got terminal cancer or whether you haven't, we've all got a finite amount of time here, and we don't know. I know I fucking hate this, but you might get hit by a bus tomorrow, but you don't know what's around the corner. Do you know, it was that one phone call where everything that you take for granted, the wallpaper not turning up for the hall, all of a sudden, everything changes on a sixpence, and your whole life is just, and it's never you. Do you know what I mean? My dad died of bowel cancer when he was young, 50, 55, mid-50s.
Yeah.
And as awful as that was, it's always somebody else, right? It's not going to be me. I wouldn't say,
Yeah.
I wasn't a big drinker or a big smoker or particularly not a saint by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm not, used to run triathlons and what have you. So it wasn't as if I was a prime candidate for any illness particularly. But, my surgeon said to me, do you do the lottery? And I said, no. He said, well, I think you should, because you've got more chance of winning the lottery than you have of beating anaplastic thyroid cancer. And
You
I
did
think
it.
it's just putting that into perspective, is that you don't know what's around the corner. So I think you are more, you do see life through a different lens. And sometimes that's scary. Sometimes that's, well, I want to do the things that are important to me. Because whether that's me or you, Ryan, what happens if I get a phone call? I still have my bloods done every couple of months. It's only going to take that one phone call again to go,
Yeah.
you've had a look at your bloods.
My father recently survived a type of cancer as well, which was about a 2-year process, but he still has to go in all the time. And we still get that little bit of anxiety, if it comes in, starts to, was it remission? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, absolutely.
starts to come back or whatever. So it's scary, but it's like, hey, you conquered it. It was like winning the lottery, but even more rare than winning the lottery. And it's all because of the mindset you had and
Yeah,
not
I think that
surrendering.
in hindsight, I think there is an element of that. Just pig-headedness, really. But again, that's what going back to what I was saying about people saying, oh, you're so brave and you're so strong and you're so whatever. Well, what's the alternative? You just got to kind of crawl through the mud and hope for the best, really. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a particularly resilient or strong or, person. It's just, you need to do whatever you need to do to just try and, that survival instinct kicks in and you just try and make the best of it. And I think, the kids being that age probably did see me through, because it's that you just want to stay alive to see them grow up and flourish. And fuck Brian, quite frankly, he's not coming in and wearing my slippers. I will wear them myself, Brian. Thank you very much.
And I'm sure writing that play, and I don't know where the name Brian came from, but I'm sure that writing that play through all of, the lockdown and all that, and going through this helped you process things and helped you get things out on paper. So,
yeah, I mean, I think what I learned about Brian is he's not actually a dick. So I assumed he was, because he was going to come in and take everything that I desperately wanted. Writing the play, he's not really sarcastic. He doesn't really take the piss. He's not, hasn't got an agenda. He's just a guy. He's just a guy who's there. I wouldn't say I grew to love Brian through writing the play, but we've still got beef, but we have an understanding now.
it's cool. It's kind of like almost not like an alter ego or something, but something to kind of reflect your own thoughts and put them on paper. And then if it becomes a legitimate play, people can see exactly how you're feeling during that period. So
I think it'd be quite interesting as a play as well, because if you don't know the story, you're like, who's this guy? Who's this guy on the stage?
I'm curious to see it or read it someday.
Yeah, I will keep you posted on that one.
And speaking of other projects you've been working on, I would love to know a little bit about Mindcake and tell me about that podcast. You kind of said a little bit about how it came about, but tell me more about that and why is it important to start talking about mental health and why did it all start?
Well, like I say, I think it started when people were coming up to me saying, you've been through the ringer. Have you got any tips? And I'm like, no, I haven't really. I'd always thought, I think, about doing a podcast. And I thought, well, why don't I try this? So I co-host with a guy called Paul Beeson. And I contacted him and said, do you fancy let's just try a couple of episodes from your kitchen and see what happens. Yeah. And the idea was to try and, he's far more woo-woo than me, right? So how have I changed was one of your questions. I didn't properly answer that, but I would say I'm much more open to things now than I was, 5 years ago, in terms of therapies and trying things and just, opening your mind.
Being vulnerable. Yeah.
However, he is far more at the woo-woo end of things, rather than I'm still a bit kind of, okay, we had a past life regressionist on. I draw the line at he was well into that. But so I had a chat with it, but I think that works quite well, because you've got one who's slightly more cynical than the other. Let's put it that way. And So we did a couple of episodes, and then I was at a conference in London for my construction, my day job. And one of the after dinner, one of the speakers was Alistair Campbell, who was Tony Blair's right-hand man, very famous in this country. So when he had a Q&A at the end, I stuck my hand up, and he's a big advocate for mental health, whatever. So I stuck my hand up, and long story short, managed to get him on the podcast. So of course it then just sort of grew, because as soon as you've had Alistair Campbell on the podcast, there's other people who people in this country would know that would want to come on the podcast, and things just grew. And we spoken to, as I said, people who've done yoga, people who've done breath work, people who do cognitive therapy, people who, cold water therapy, to spirit guides and past life regressionists, crystal healers. And we don't take ourselves too seriously like this. It's very conversational. And I think it's important. I think it's important that people do have these conversations. I think people are having these conversations more. I think since lockdown changed a lot for me, but just generally, I think lockdown changed things for a lot of people.
It did. It did. I mean, being a recovery podcast, I hear so many stories about people whose addictions and alcoholism got worse during the lockdown because they had so much time on their hands, couldn't go out and do what they usually do, and it just resulted in so much depression, and people had to numb it somehow. So
yeah,
a lot of mental health issues.
Yeah. And I think it was a very difficult time, and so I think it is. But I think it, as much as my story was a wake-up call for me, I think COVID was a wake-up call for a lot of people anyway. And I think, it's good that conversations can be had, to add into the mix. I've recently been diagnosed with ADHD as well, which has opened up a lot of kind of questions, I guess, about my character and behavior and what have you. But no, I think it's important, obviously it's a heavy, it can be a heavy subject matter, but I think we do have a bit of humor. We do have a bit of light entertainment with each other. Just basically, I just like taking the piss out of Paul. And yeah, I think it's good to have that. It's good to have that balance. Like I say, however ridiculous things might seem. So B therapy, we've had B therapy, but however ridiculous things might seem, it might work for you. It might not work for me. And who am I to say? Well, who are you to say? Even if it's a placebo effect, if it helps, then who are you to say otherwise? So, I think it's important to. I've had quite a lot of things on with people. Even myself, I've gone and done, say bee therapy. So bee therapy, you go in like a glamping pod, and they put the bees in the hives underneath the pod. So when you go in and you're lying on the beds, the bees aren't in with you, but you can. There's a vibration of the wings, which apparently I can't remember what note or tone that they buzz in, but it's supposed to help with PTSD. You've got the pheromones, you've got the smell and whatever, and whether that works or whether it doesn't, I don't know. Well, I fell asleep. I was relaxed as anything. Me and Paul fell asleep, so it was relaxing. So is it a game changer? I don't know, but it's certainly, again, for someone with ADHD with 110 tabs open all the time.
That's such a good way to put it.
Certainly.
I'm the same way.
Yeah. Well, then, I had 0 tabs open. The bees buzzing and the pheromones or whatever. I was out for using my pollinators t-shirt. I love the bees.
Nice.
So, I think, for me, I'm trying different things I try and have an open mind on a lot of things. And, we get so many messages from people going, I'd never heard of such and such, or I'd never thought of maybe trying that. And now I have. And actually, I found that it really helps. And that's great. If you can help a handful of people who maybe try different things and it's helped their mental health, or even if they, I'm not saying you have to have a bad mental health to listen to Mindcake, but, we just have people who just enjoy the chats and, just, it's a bit of entertainment for half an hour. So I think if you can have the conversations and open up the dialogue and maybe introduce new things to folk that maybe think about things differently, or maybe try things with a different hat on, then I think that can only be a good thing. And I say, if nothing else, it gets me out trying different things, which helps me. So that's great.
Yeah. What would you say is there like one conversation that you can think of that stands out as that impacted you the most since you've been doing the show?
I think we had a politician on who said that, at the end of the day, this too will pass. Now, whether that's good or bad or whatever you're going through, it will pass. The good times don't last forever. The bad times don't last forever. And it's just a case of trying to navigate your way through that.
That relates to recovery. I mean, a lot of my listeners out there are in recovery or sober curious, and so much of what we talked about today relates to that too. That this too shall pass. Because I gave up on myself. I sent suicidal ideation texts to people while I was at my worst. And I had to crawl out of that because it did pass. And 21 months sober now, I see the light now, and I'm like, wow, it does pass. So I love. And
do you find doing it this cathartic?
Extremely. I was doing a live episode with somebody this morning, and they were asking me a similar question about it, and I'm like, yes, just talking to people about it. People, even if their background and their story is completely different than mine, like talking to yourself right now, I can't relate to a lot of what you've been through, and maybe vice versa, but like still we had to fight a battle, and we both had to crawl out of it in a different way and different perspectives, and it is healing. Just it makes me more vulnerable too, and talk about my stuff, because the more I do this, the more I hear stories and people opening up, the more I feel like finally opening up too. So it's good. It's very therapeutic.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's like you say, it almost gives you permission because you hear other people's stories and you go, wow, that's just, I think people should talk more openly about stuff. And yeah, I think particularly at the moment where things seem to be getting so polarized in terms of division and what have you, if we can just kind of, and I think, going back to social media, there's such a sort of cohort of people who are, presenting themselves as this perfect world where they're, doing so well and the kids are doing so well. And that just adds pressure to people, I think, because you start to judge yourself against other people and go, well, why am I not feeling great 100% of the time? There must be something wrong with me. And so I think to have that conversation, people go, no, it's perfectly normal to do that or say that or feel like that or whatever. And I think that's the big thing for me, is that whilst we're trying all these different things on the podcast, it's equally that I remember when I've heard people talk about the way I felt about stuff, and you suddenly go, well, there's other people who feel like this. I'm not some weirdo who's just, it's so, I won't say liberating, but it can be so isolating when you feel that you're the only person that feels that way, because everyone else on social media is having a fantastic time. And everyone says, all your friends, because, even with your friends and family, you don't necessarily know what's going on behind closed doors. You only see the facade of what they're prepared to present. And that can be a very kind of, when you don't feel that maybe you match up to that. So I think to have these conversations in terms of, well, actually, sometimes life's a bit shit. And we always need to, give each other some help and encouragement and talk about these things. And then you feel less alone and less isolated, because you go, oh, right, I thought I was just the idiot who felt it on their own, and you're not.
Yep, you're not alone. You are not alone. And it's one of the things in recovery. It's like, just, I'm sure when you started opening up to other people and getting to know other people who battled illnesses or cancer or anything like that, I'm sure you've been able to realize that you weren't alone the entire time, and there's other people doing it. And I'm sure they love to hear from you, even people that will be watching this episode, that you were told you had 6 months, and now look at you now, 6 years later. It's incredible. You're there for your family. You have a whole different perspective on life. You're talking to people about it, helping people. So it's pretty incredible.
Yeah. Well, I say I'm down at because the kids have broken up from school now in Scotland for the summer. So I'm actually I've come down from Scotland to my mum's on the south coast of England, and we're, going out down the quay and having an ice cream. And I think that's the thing. It's not necessarily the big things that you remember or the big things that are important. It's the little things, it's the little memories, little things that the kids have said to you, or
stand out.
Those brief moments when you maybe shared an ice cream or fish and chips or whatever. So that's what we're doing at the minute. We're down at my mum's and enjoying the seaside and the sunshine, and that's, you can't buy that. You can't buy that.
That's incredible. That's so beautiful to hear. And a couple closing questions is, what advice or what would you tell someone who's listening right now, or anybody following the podcast or checks out your podcast, like they receive life-changing news, or if they're battling something right now, whether it's cancer or something else, or even people that are battling addiction, what advice would you give them based on what you've learned?
I guess my advice would be twofold in that, firstly, reach out to somebody, anybody, so that you don't feel so isolated and alone, and have that outlet to chat to folk. If you don't know anyone yourself, then there's always, depending on what you're going through. With me, it was Maggie's cancer care. And yeah, I think having that outlet to talk about stuff and just get it off your chest is hugely beneficial, so that you don't feel alone, that you're going through this on your own. And I guess the other thing is something I alluded to earlier, is that, try not to think of, the bigger picture. If you can, if rather than go, I'm so, and again, it's that voice in your head beating yourself up about the fact that you haven't done this or you haven't done that. Just tiny incremental things that will then add up to, so brush your teeth, have a shower, get dressed, just do what's here in front of you.
Yeah.
And those things will you'll be up and you'll be having a cup of tea in the kitchen. And if that's all you do that day, that's okay. But just, don't beat yourself up about, trying to, I should be doing this and I should be doing that. You can only do what you can do. And I think breaking things down into small, however small those are, like I say, even if it's just pulling your socks on, making your bed, whatever it might be, and don't get carried away with the bigger stuff, because sometimes, it can just be too overwhelming. And then, as my mother-in-law says, it's paralysis by analysis. You spend too much time thinking about all this stuff and ruminating about it all, and you don't actually do anything. So yeah, I would say speak to people and break stuff down into small steps, and you'd be surprised how much you can achieve. If I can say something just on
Of course.
we had someone on the podcast called Kit Burks, and she spent 12 months walking from the northern tip of Europe, which is in the Arctic Circle, I think it's Norway, down to the southernmost tip of Europe, which is in Greece. And she's just finished. We had her on the podcast before she left, and she's doing it for suicide prevention, or to raise awareness for suicide prevention.
Yeah.
And, as she will say, you can only make that journey with one step at a time. Her journey of however many 1,000 miles it was from the north to the south of England, north to the south of Europe, started with one step.
Yep. That's so true.
We've all got to start somewhere, and just keep taking those small steps, and before you know it, who knows where you might be.
So true. So well said. And I love that, referring to suicidal ideation, because that's a big topic on the show, and so many people on the show have reached low points like myself where we thought about ending our life, and then talking to you, putting in a different perspective, is where you were told you only have this much time to live, so not even given an option. So it just puts a whole new perspective on appreciating life as a whole. So
definitely
thank you so much for being on here. Do you want to shout out your podcast, where people can reach you on social media, where people can check out your stuff, your content?
Yeah, sure. No, it's if you search the socials, we're mainly on Instagram and Facebook, Mindcake Podcast. And again, podcasts are on Apple, Spotify, or the main, wherever you get your pods in your ears. Search for Mindcake Podcast, and we'd love to have you.
I really appreciate you being on here, Lee. Honestly, it was great talking to you, and I appreciate you bringing a different story and background to the show, and just giving listeners a different perspective on life and appreciating life. So thank you.
No, I really appreciate you having me on, Ryan. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Rock Bottom with Ryan. No bullshit, just recovery.